All right, so let's go over the basics of Excel. So notice that we have our worksheet here. Notice that the sheet here is labeled example. The sheet name is actually labeled down here in the tabs. In order to make another sheet, you can type in the plus icon and it generates another sheet for your list. So for example, in this case, the new sheet is called sheet 5. If I type in something in this first sheet labeled example, and then I switch to sheet 5, then switch back to example, notice that the information is saved. So I can save multiple sheets within a file. If you want to delete a sheet, just click on the sheet, right click, and then you can click delete. All right, so let's look at this example. In this sheet, we're going to type in statistics is fun. All right, so a pretty silly example, but what we want to do is notice that the text actually runs off of column A. It's still technically in column A. So if I click on column B, notice that there's nothing in this box here. That's because there's nothing in the cell. So if I went and typed in something in B, then it would, B has its own, information in it. Okay. All right. So if I wanted to make this column, larger, I can simply hover over the column A, the right corner of column A, and then click, hold, and drag the column so that it's wider or narrower depending on my preference. In this case, I want to extend it past in order for the text to fit. You can also, if it's actually down here, you can also hover over here and then double click and the program automatically adjusts to the text. All right, notice that the columns are labeled by letters A, B, C, D, and so on. And the rows are labeled as numbers. So if I wanted to type in something in cell B2, well, that's the intersection of B and row 2, which would be this cell here. Okay, so if I want to type in something in cell B2, then click on the cell and type in whatever you want. If you click on the cell, notice that the contents are included on this bar here. So you can also adjust any text that you see in this bar. So if I wanted to add something to it, like let's say another number, then it automatically updates the cell that way. And then you can always check the content or enter. All right, if you want to delete something from a cell or a group of cells, so let's say you have a bunch of numbers here, you can highlight the data. So if you want to select data, just click, hold, and drag. You can do this as long as you have this white cross icon. So you can click, hold, and drag any number of cells. Then you can hit the delete button on the keyboard, and it deletes all the cells. If you do this with the back space key, it only deletes one of the cells, and then you have to go and delete manually the other ones. So in order to delete everything, make sure you highlight everything and then select the delete button, not the backspace key. All right, so let's talk about generating lists. So let's say we wanted to copy this cell, the contents of this cell, over and over again and make a list from it. Well, one way that you could do that is make sure you click the cell that you're interested in, hover over the bottom right hand corner until it turns into this black cross icon. Click, hold, and drag until you select the number of cells that you want this to be copied into. And there you go. So now all of the contents have been copied over into these other cells. All right, so maybe you might not want to copy this one in particular, but let's say you wanted to make a list with numbers in which the computer counts for you from 1 to, say, 50. Well, if you want to do that, just click on a cell, type in 1, enter, type in 2. So now you got 2 cells. Now that you gave the computer a pattern, if you highlight those 2 cells, the computer is able to tell that you want to count, from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So highlight those cells, click on the bottom right hand corner, just like this, click, hold, and drag. Notice that there's a number that pops up to the right of the cursor. There's an 8, 9, and a 10 now. That tells you the stopping point. So if I stop here, it'll count to 10. And you could do this with any kind of list. So if you wanted to count by fives, make sure that you give the computer a few numbers so that it knows what you want to count by. Highlight the numbers, go to the bottom right hand corner, click, hold, and drag, and it'll start counting by fives for you. All right, remember if you want to delete a list, select the entire list and then click delete. All right, so now that's how we generate lists. Next thing we want to do is we want to move information around. So let's say I no longer want this data to be located in these cells and I want to move it to column D. Well, I can highlight the cells and then I can hover over the corners or the edges of this selection. When I do that, notice it goes from this white cursor to this black looking cursor. It looks like a Cartesian XY plane if you look at it with the arrows. All right. So once you do that, that's the moving cursor. So that allows you to move any selections. So you can click, hold, and then move it or drag it over anywhere that you'd like to move the cells. So let's say we want to move it to D, and there you go. All right, let's say we wanted to move it another way. So another way to move this, you can actually move anything from an entire column if you'd like. So if I click column D and I want to move everything in column D over, I can actually insert another column. In order to do that, I can right click the column and click insert, and that inserts an entirely new column and moves it over to the next one here. I can also do this with rows. So if I want to click an entire row, make sure you select the row, right click, insert, and it inserts an entirely new row. So those are a few ways of moving items or data around. All right, now let's talk about using formulas. So if you want to use a formula, you always start with an equal sign. So all formulas start with an equal sign. Let's say we wanted to add all the add 5 to all of these numbers. All right, well, click on the cell that you want to start the formula in, type in equals. Now this time we want to add, we want to add 1 plus 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in 1 plus 5, and this serves as a calculator, nothing more. You can enter and it adds the numbers for you. So you can use this for any kind of calculation. So if you have equals and you wanted to do, let's say, 2 times or 2 plus 3 times 5, then it does the calculation for you. So Excel can serve as a calculator for you to do a bunch of calculations. All right, well that's good. So let's say instead of doing instead of just writing it like this, 1 plus 5, how do I make it so that I have a formula that I can, copy down? So if I wanted to take this and I copy it, well, you know that we can generate lists now and by hovering over the bottom right hand corner. So if we try to generate a list out of this, well, notice that we get a bunch of repeating 6s. So the computer is not adding 5 to the 2. It's not adding 5 to the 3 like we want it to. So how do we work around this? So in order to add 5 to every single one of these numbers, you got to start with the equal sign for a formula. We need to assign a variable. Okay, so what we do is we select the cell that we want to add 5 to. So I'm going to select that cell. Notice that it's highlight the cells and it's labeled E5, which is the location, the cell address. All right, so that now basically E5 serves as my variable. I can add 5 to it. And notice I also get the same result, 6. You can also type in the cell name. So if I type in cell E5, it will give me the same result. So E5 plus 5 equals 6. All right, well, what's the purpose of this? Well, if you do it this way, then the computer is thinking of the E5 as a variable. So as you move down and copy the formula, it will actually adjust the formula as needed. So let's go ahead and go to the bottom right hand corner, click, hold, and drag, and notice that each of these cells are adjusting. So instead of E5, it's now going to be E6, and then this one's E7, E8, and so on. So the computer's thinking of it as a variable that adjusts as you go down. All right, so basically if you want to use a formula in which it applies to formula everywhere, make sure that you're using the cell address. All right. So now let's say we wanted to look at a specific exercise. So in this exercise, we want to be able to make a frequency plot, or frequency table rather, and we want to be able to make a bar graph using the frequencies and make a pie graph for a statistical analysis. All right, so in this example, this is just a bunch of answers to a yes, no, maybe question. And we collected the results of the survey. All right, so in this case, this is the answer or the response that was given. There's only 3 responses, yes, no, or maybe. So we're going to label that response. Now what we want to do is we want to sort this list. In order to sort this list from alphabetical order, we select the entire list, and then we want to sort it, so you can use the sort function here, this button, or you can use this. So notice that you see this arrow from A to Z, that sorts it alphabetically from A to Z, and this sorts it, the opposite way from Z to A. So I'm going to select A to Z because I want to sort it alphabetically. This is a very useful function because it sorts all of the data in the way that you want, and it helps you count how many responses of each type you have. All right, so let's say we wanted to list these numbers, right? So let's say we wanted to list them from 1 to 2, 1 to whatever, however many responses we have. All right, so I'm going to select the 1 and 2, click on the bottom right hand corner, drag it down, and this serves kind of as a way to count how many responses we have. We have 32 responses. Another way to do this, to count the number of responses, is if you highlight the cells, there is a count over here, if you notice, and this count says that there's 32 cells. So every time, that's another way to tell how many responses you have, is select the number of cells, and then the count function actually counts it for you. Okay, in any case, let's go ahead and start our frequency. So remember that second column is frequency, and we want to simply count, the frequencies that we have, or count how many we have here. So let's call this sorted response, because these are the sorted responses. And I'm going to go ahead and drag this to make it bigger. All right, so I want to actually move this because I want to give myself room for the table. So I'm going to move that there. All right, so we got our response. So the responses here are maybe, no, or yes. So those are our 3 responses and our frequencies. So let's count. So let's use the count function to help you out here. So I select the M's, and notice the count function says there's 6 on this bottom right hand corner. So I have 6 of them. All right, there's 9 of those. And there's 17. All right, so let's include the total row. Now I want to add up these numbers. So we got to introduce a new function here. So remember, when we use a formula, we need the equal sign. So equals, and then we're going to type in sum, S-U-M. So that adds the numbers together. So notice it says adds all the numbers in a range of cells. Parentheses. Notice that this says number 1, number 2, and so on. So it wants you to select the numbers. So select your cells, click, hold, and drag. Close the parentheses, and then enter. So it adds all the cells for you. All right, so now we got the frequencies. Let's do the relative frequency. Again, I need to make this column bigger. So there you go. All right, so now we want to do the relative frequency. Remember, the formula for relative frequency is frequency divided by total times 100. So that we're going to type in that formula here. So we got equals. I'm going to click on the cell that I'm interested in. So that divided by 32 times 100. So the reason why I don't click on the cell 32 is because if I click on cell 32, then the computer thinks that's a variable. And remember, 32 is not a variable because it stays the same in the entire formula. So if I enter this, I get 18.75%. If I click and hold and drag this, then it applies the formula here, and I'm going to extend it here, and we should get 100%. Again, let me repeat what I was saying about the formula earlier. So if I did F4 divided by 32 times 100, you're going to get the same result for the first cell. However, if you click, hold, and drag this, you're going to get the wrong result for the rest. The reason is because the computer thinks this is a variable. So the computer thinks that you want to change the location of 32, the 32 cell. So it adjusts it and makes it go down, which is not what we want. We want to keep 32 constant, so we're simply going to type in 32. All right. So now we got our relative frequency response. Let's go ahead and add in borders. So if you want to add borders to a table, highlight the entire table, and we're going to go to the Home tab. You want to go to this border button here, where it says borders. Click on that, that drag down arrow. So we got a bunch of options here. I want to include all borders, and this puts lines and grid lines over an entire table, so it looks nice. All right, I also want to bold these titles, so I'm going to select those cells, and I'm going to click the B button for bold, and it bolds that. All right, so now it actually looks like a table. Now let's make a bar graph using the frequencies. So if I want to make a bar graph, I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to click on this bar graph icon here. It's a bunch of bars. It says Insert Column or Bar Chart. So you click on that. We're going to click the first option, 2D column, clustered column. Now notice that the chart is sort of in the way of my graph or my table. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag that over so I have room. First thing you want to do is you want to select data here. So you want to select, what's your x-axis, what's your y-axis, like what's your data. So we're going to go to select data here. Let's move this down so that we can look at our data. Okay, so notice that, so we're going to go ahead and click add for legend entries. All right, so we got to add our data. So notice it wants the series values. Okay, so we're going to select our series values. And that's our Y values. So we want to select our Y values here. Well, we want to graph frequency, right? So we're going to select the frequencies. I'm going to click OK. Now we need to adjust the x-axis. The way to adjust the x-axis is the horizontal axis labels over here. So we're going to click on Edit. It says Axis Label Range. So it wants you to label the x-axis. So click and hold and drag over the cells. And notice that it's adjusted. We have the labels for the x-axis. So we're going to click OK and then OK. All right, so now we got our chart. And this makes sense. On the x-axis we have the response, on the y-axis we have the frequency. Now we want to add, labels to this. So you can click on the chart. There's a plus icon that appears here. That's to add chart elements. So click on that, and you can add your axes titles and anything else that you want. All right, so now we're going to click on the axis title, click on it, and then we're going to edit the text. So we're going to call that frequency. Click on this, edit, and we're going to call this response. All right, we're going to edit the title because we want to put a nice title for this. So responses to survey questionnaire. All right, so we got our bar chart working. Now, if you want to adjust anything, like if you want to adjust the colors of any bars, etc., you can always click on the bars. So if you double click on the bars, it pops up with a format. You can change the color by clicking on this bucket here, and then fill, and then you can change the color. So let's say we wanted to change it to a gray or a yellow, then you can do that. You can do it for a single bar, or you can do it for all the bars. Okay, so you can play around with the settings here. All right, so now next up is the pie. So if we want to do a pie graph, we're going to go insert, and there is a pie graph indicator here. So it's the circle, insert pie, or donut chart. So click on the drop down arrow. We're going to do 2D pie. Okay, drag this down just to give us more room. So again, we want to select the data. All right, so now if we want to select our cells, remember, click on edit for legend entries. Go on values, just delete that. Select your relative frequencies because we're interested in the percents here. All right, okay. Now edit your axis, your labels, basically. And you're going to label these, you're going to select those cells for the labels. And then okay. All right, so notice if you look at the pie chart, it's all labeled with a legend here. All right, so if you want to edit anything, you can always, click on it, double click on it, and edit anything out that you want. You can add anything to the title. And that's all there is to it. Now let's look at an example in which we're doing a dot plot. So we're interested in doing a dot plot for the next exercise. All right, so let's look at the following data. So this is the ages of some high school students that were selected. Okay, so this is age. Let's go ahead and sort the data again. So click, hold, and drag. And then we want to go to sort. So in order to go to sort, you got to go to data tab. And then sort function here. So I want to sort it from smallest to largest. So I'm going to click on this one. All right, there you go. So it's sorted. So we're going to call this sorted age. I'm going to increase the size of that column. All right, so now somewhere I'm going to start my frequency, or not frequency, my dot plot at some point. But before we do that, let's go ahead and calculate the average age. So let's call this average age. All right, I'm going to click on this cell because I want to calculate the age. So remember, to calculate a formula, you need to type in the equal sign. And I'm going to type in average, parentheses. All right, so this is going to average all the numbers that I select, number 1, number 2, and so on. So I'm going to select the cells, click, hold, and drag, release. And notice our cells are selected, close the parentheses, enter. So the average age of the high school students in this example is about 16. All right, so that's how you calculate the average. We're going to go ahead and do a dot plot for this. Okay, so in order to do a dot plot, you need to make sure your data is sorted like this. So now that it's sorted, what we want to do is we want to start another column on this left side. Okay, so since we have 14 as the age, for this first one, we're going to start with 1, 2, and so on. So remember how to generate a list. So click, hold, and drag for the bottom right hand corner. And we're going to stop until we get to the last entry of 14. Okay, so what we're doing is we're counting all the cells that have 14. Now let's count all the cells that have 15. Okay, so we'll start at 1, 2, select the cells, click, hold, and drag all the way to the last 15. So now it says that we got 4 15s. There's a reason why we're doing this. It's because this is going to help us generate our dot plot. So start at 1 again for the next new number, 2, and then rinse and repeat. So the numbers here on this that we're actually calculating are the dots. So this is telling us how many dots we're going to stack for each number, for each cell. All right, so I'm going to call this stack, and this is simply, the stack for the dots, for the dot plot. All right, so Excel doesn't have a dedicated dot plot function, unfortunately. So we're working a way around this by using this stack column right here. So we're going to insert a scatter plot. So you go to insert and then go to scatter. Now a scatter plot is not technically a dot plot, right? It's a specific type of dot plot, but it's not the dot plot that we want. But we can work around this. So click on the scatter. We're going to go select data. We're going to select, so let's go ahead and select add legend entry. Go to, now notice it's asking for the X values and Y values, right? So for the Y values, I'm going to delete those. So my Y values are, so my X values here are going to be Y values. So Y values are going to be the stacks here. So let's select the stacks. Okay, our X values are going to be the age. All right, I'm going to try this again just because it was, giving me a little issues. So select data. So add legend entry. I'm going to select my X values first. Oops, my X values, this is the wrong one. I don't want that. I want my X values to be the age for the dot plot. Okay, and then I want my Y values, so I can click on that, to be the stack. Okay, I'm going to click on this, just kind of release that. Okay, so now I got my dot plot. So I select OK. OK. So it kind of looks like a dot plot. However, I don't really want, the dot plot to start at 0. Okay, so I want to actually make it start early, like later on, like 10 or something. So if I want to do that, I can adjust the axis. Okay, and I also can adjust, how the dots look like as well. I also remember a dot plot doesn't have this vertical axis, right? So what I want to do is I want to delete this vertical axis. So I'm going to select on this axis. I'm going to hit delete, and that gets rid of the axis. I also want to get rid of the grid lines, because I don't really want the grid lines. So in order to do that, just select the grid lines, and then you can hit delete for each of the grid lines. All right, so it's looking more and more like a dot plot. Now let's go ahead and adjust this axis. So I'm going to double click that, and it's going to show it with format axis. So you can choose your minimum X axis or your X value and maximum X value. So let's change the minimum X value to like 10 and see how that changes the graph. All right, so it looks like this. So it looks a little better, and we can adjust it as necessary. So if we want to adjust it more, so let's adjust it to, let's say, 13. And then let's make the maximum of 20 looks fine. We can adjust how much it goes by. So if it goes by 2s or 1s, we'll make it go by 1s. That's perfectly fine. All right, so that looks pretty good. So it looks more and more like a dot plot. Now what we can do is we can adjust the dots. So click any of the dots or double click the dots. And if you double click the dots, you can actually click on the bucket icon and click on marker. And you can change the colors of the dots if you like. So I'm going to change it to black. And I'm also going to change the size of the dots here. So in order to change the size, all right, so in order to change the size, you want to click on marker options and then click on built-in. Now you could change the type of dot that you're looking at. We're just going to use the regular dot, and we're going to change the size of the dots. So you can adjust the size as you want. Okay, and that looks pretty good. So we will stop there. So there's a dot plot. So you can change the titles. Remember to add the axes. You use the plus icon. Add. We're going to go ahead and let's click on this right arrow. We only want a horizontal axis. So there you go. And then you can label that age. All right. And that's all there is to it, guys.